Welcome to the Tower Wealth Advisory podcast series. Today we're chatting about retirement planning and whether or not you might be retirement ready. I'm Tyler.
I'm Dave.
Let's get into it.
So I think, it's such a big topic. As much as we sit down with clients and we always talk financial planning, and there's lots of different considerations, major purchase planning, cash flow, business concerns, estate planning. One thing that's prominent in everybody's plan is retirement planning.
Right. Yeah.
Obviously, I want to get to that stage.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of factors, and I think what we always are trying to direct people to is what are the different pieces you need to look at in order to prepare for your retirement. So what would you say are the top few things we would tell clients that they have to focus on or that they have to understand in order to get there?
Well, it's pretty broad, I guess, but I know one of the comments I make to clients is that retirement's different for everybody. It's not always the same, and retirement might not mean that you stop working. So quite often I'll refer to retirement as a time when you're what we would call independently wealthy. So you can choose to work, you don't have to work. So
Right.
Some clients choose to continue working. Maybe they're a business owner who's really passionate about their business and they want to stay involved in it, so they just keep working. So they may be retirement ready, meaning they can live off of their assets, but they choose not to. So that's, I guess, one of the things I talked about.
Same as some of our clients who basically have that resignation letter in their drawer and they're just waiting for the day someone pisses them off at work and they hand that in and
can't wait.
I'm on my way. Yeah.
Yeah. What else would we talk about, I guess, in terms of preparing and being ready for retirement?
Well, I think everybody's always, do I need $1 million? I mean, it's kind of, sometimes it's an arbitrary number people ask, like, if I don't have $1 million, I can't retire. So I think a lot of the planning is you have to look at your, what sources do you have? And there's multiple different places money will come in from. It could come in from just your normal savings, pensions, government pensions, CPP, OAS. Mm-hmm. It can come from your company if you have a company. It can come from your tax-free savings accounts, your RSPs. So it's the balance between all those things. And I think that's what confuses people is, where do I draw it from? How much do I draw it from? Is there an efficient way to do it? So I think it's getting a handle on what are the sources of assets that you're going to liquidate in retirement. Where's a list of those? And everybody should kind of have a handle on what those numbers are. So when we're talking about retirement planning, we're going to gather all of that information because we need to know it so we can plan out how to get that money back in their pockets when they retire. I mean, it's almost like the opposite of turning the tap on, reversing the tap. People who save monthly into either a pension plan or their RSPs or tax-free savings account, you retire and you flip the switch and it goes the other way. It just pays out in the reverse way.
Yeah.
I think the other big piece when we talk retirement planning with our clients is it kind of ties in what you said. Are you going to work? Like, what is retirement? Retirement is so different for each individual. We like to get people to think of their retirement in different compartments, kind of pre-retirement, those years of in retirement, your first chunk of years in retirement, where generally what we try and tell people is give us a kind of time zone or time duration that you think is your active retirement years, meaning you're out there, whether it's traveling or hobbies or, having another property for to retire on. I mean, whatever it might be, what are you going to actively be doing when you retire? And let's face it, some of those things that people want to do cost more money than what they were earning and spending before they retired. And this seems to be scary for people. Somehow we've kind of got to this magic belief, I have $1 million, I make 5% a year, I can spend $50,000 a year, which doesn't take into consideration inflation, lump sum expenditures sometimes. So what we talk about that first stage is, how many years do you think you're going to be as active as possible and doing the things you want to do? So let's say someone retires at 60, we might say, okay, 60 to 75, you're going to need $100,000 per year. And that, we work with the math with people. We don't make up arbitrary numbers. But then from 75 to the remainder, the second stage of retirement, you might need 60,000. And we might reduce your overall value of your liquid assets in the first 15 years. And like I said, that goes back to people getting scared. They think they have to have an asset lump sum that never goes down. And then we think that it's reasonable to have $1 million and have 500,000 after 15 years, because you're using your principal and you're using your earnings to supply the liquidity.
Supply your lifestyle. And
Right.
I guess what you're saying is that lifestyle in the first 15 years is more expensive because you're more active, you're traveling, you're doing the things that you've always wanted to do in retirement, and that's more costly. And then in the next 15 to 20 years might be when your ability to do those things due to health and age is reduced your capacity to do those things, so you're spending
And your
decreases
desire.
there. And your desire to do it, yes.
Yeah. And so, this is whether you have outside investments or just a pension plan, this is what happens when you just have a fixed income, which is either CPP, OAS, some GIS, or a straight government pension, or a pension from your employer. If that's all you have, then you are living on $50,000 a year, say, for example. It's partially indexed to inflation and never going to change, which means you're going to be 90 getting $85,000 a year, of which it's the same as getting
50 years.
Well, maybe 40,000 with the fact it's not totally indexed inflation. And that might not even be enough, or it might be too much. So what we're saying is you don't have the same income needs for every single year of your retirement. They're going to change.
Right. Yeah. I think that's one of the confusing things that clients get into is they look at retirement as an end goal, and it's not the end. It's just the beginning of a different life phase. Your planning has to continue into and continuing into retirement the same way that you planned before retirement, and you had life phases before retirement where you're starting out and then getting married, having kids, and going through those high cost years where you're buying a house and cars and all that stuff. Education for the kids, you name it. All of these are life phases.
Yeah.
And it comes into a financial plan where you say, okay, well, the next life phase is retirement. It's not an end point where you quit saving and stop planning. Retirement has to have a significant amount of planning too. Taking into account what your sources of income are going to be in retirement is a big part of that, because I think the planning that I know that you and I do is how can we get the most tax efficient income into your pocket at retirement, which allows you to stretch your retirement dollars. If you're bleeding a little less out to CRA, then you can, I guess, build or keep your retirement asset longer or create a higher income by not paying out a tax.
Well, exactly.
Net income.
Because we're in retirements, we don't really have a true source of employment income. All of our income is going to come from our investments, our pensions, etc. Each one of those dollars earned from those different sources is not a dollar. We always like to measure our returns from investments and producing income for our clients in an after tax methodology. Just because you earn $1 from a pension isn't the same as earning $1 from a non-registered account. It might have more purchasing power than the $1 from your pension. So it's about looking at those pieces. Obviously, taxation's huge, and there's all sorts of, taxation's a whole other webinar we do, but the tax is the key, once again. How about one of the things from retirement planning when we're looking at how much money does someone need, one of the pieces we do as well as we ask that question is, what do you want to be left with when you're not here anymore? And not you, I guess. What do you want to leave behind your estate? Because that factors into retirement planning.
Yep.
There's people who grew up and they might have grown up somewhat poor, so they're very good savers, but they have this massive amount of money, and somehow magically the day you retire, you don't become this, you're not flipping cash.
Expender.
It's not Dumb and Dumber. You're not handing cash off to every single person you walk by type deal. But so you generally don't change the way you are. But, for some of those clients, we're like, well, how much do you want to leave behind to your kids? And you get some people who are in retirement and want to leave as much as they can, and they're willing to live frugally in retirement as they were living. You have others who are like, well, they get whatever's left over. And even explaining sometimes some of those people, well, there's going to be an awful lot left over based on your size of the amount of assets you have and the amount you spend, or you will not be able to spend it all. So it's really good for us to, determine points. This is the start of retirement. We need X amount of dollars in total combined assets to produce this higher level of income for the next, call it 15 years. And then we need from 15 years to whenever you pass away, we'll probably need in this range. And we want to make sure that there's this amount of lump sum left over for the kids or the state, whoever it might be. So with those numbers, we can do a lot of work. We can figure out what kind of risk needs to be taken in the portfolio. And I think that one's a big piece.
I know one of the ways that we've put some clients' minds at ease when they're spending their retirement dollars, because they maybe have this perception that they need to hold on to a chunk that they can leave to their kids, for example. We've put an insurance policy in place and said, here, buy an insurance policy. It's not that costly in terms of your overall portfolio size and the percentage that it costs of it. And let the life insurance pay to your estate, pay to your kids, whoever the beneficiary is that you want it to be. And then spend comfortably, spend without that concern in your head that you have to maintain a pot at the end of the day when you roll into the grave. And then they'll feel more comfortable going out and spending their retirement dollars, knowing that there's an asset there that will pay out on the life insurance side.
And if you're a husband and wife or a couple, I guess, I mean, the definition's changed a lot over the years. Joint lasted I is what we would use. Usually, typically between spouses, your bulk of your assets, if one spouse passes away, will pass over to that other spouse, tax deferred. And only on the death of the second spouse, typically, do you see a huge amount of taxation come into place. So the whole point of insurance for the kids is to pay the tax bill on the estate, and then to transfer a lump sum to the kids or the heirs without a lot of interference. So that's the key of insurance is, it doesn't go through your will. When your will is read, your insurance is not even part of that. It passes around the estate. So that's a great piece. We always joke too about that. Well, you just have to figure out, how to pass away after you spent your last dollar then. You got a couple $1 million life insurance policy that's going to pay out when the last person's gone, but you're out of money. But there's ways to deal with that too. You have a big life insurance policy or an asset like a life insurance policy, you can borrow against that. So retirement planning has got a lot of factors, and it really, I think a lot of it depends too on your employment status. Do you work for an employer? And if you do, does the employer have a pension plan available for you, or do they have some type of savings plan? So that's one way to build. You have your CPP, your OAS, that could be built up just from being in Canada and saving into one of the programs. And, then if you're a business owner, that becomes a big piece, because you don't have pensions. You don't have a lot of the pieces that most Canadians have. So you have to build these on your own way inside of your corporations. And that's what we specialize in, obviously, is how to build up some assets inside of a corporation and how to extract them at a later date. So I think maybe, I know we're going to have a different webinar on sources of retirement income, but just a quick touch on, CPP. Doesn't matter who we talk to. There's a lot of confusion as to what CPP is, what OAS is. And I think, just to keep it fairly straight, and we'll get into more detail in another one, is, CPP is pretty much your pension plan with the government that you've put into. So your employer's been taking money from your income and putting it in, and they match up a little bit. And there's an active pool of money. I know we always think that anything that goes to the government is just spent, and there is no pool of money there. There is a large pool, and a very well-managed pool with CPP. And unfortunately, though, how well they do with that pool of money doesn't mean you're going to get an increase in your pension. It just means the ability to make sure that your pension's there when you retire is there. So you get that based on the amount of years you contributed and whether you hit the maximum contributions. So that one's probably the clearest one for most people. They get a statement, they see that. It's the OAS. I always find that's a little interesting, is people feel that CPP is like OAS, that one day it's just not going to be there. Well, I've got a lot more confidence in CPP. OAS is just paid from government coffers. Your only requirement is how many years you've lived in Canada. As long as you're 40 plus years, you get the full chunk.
It's just coming out of general revenue, right?
Right. Yeah. So at some point I could see that being cut, but I think they would have tried it by now. But I guess maybe, with the baby boomers gone by, 1/3 of your electorate is no longer being asked to, by the way, we slashed your OAS, you're going to lose the next election. So maybe once the boomers are through, who knows? Personally, I think there's ways to do that, but I guess the sense is that there's just not enough income in Canada for people who are retired. So that's there. So that's, those two are kind of some factors that we have. And a lot of clients we have, they ask us to plan without things like OAS factored into the plan. So that's the possibility to do that too.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess the only other comment I would make around being retirement ready, if that's what we're calling this, would be around budget planning. So whether or not you're retirement ready is really dependent upon what you're going to spend in retirement. We kind of touched on it a bit earlier, but people have a budget before they move into retirement. take a close look at what that budget is and look at the numbers and see which ones are going to fall away when you retire. Do any of them disappear? If not, well, then you need 100% of the income that you're making right now before retirement to continue in retirement.
Yeah.
If there's pieces that you feel will fall away, like there's some, standards out there that say you're going to need 70 to 75% of your income in retirement. And really that's all around becoming debt free once you hit retirement, assuming that 25% of your income is going towards debt repayment. If those debts disappear, well, you're really living off of the 75. So it's not the same for everybody. You can't put that number out there and say that works for everyone. So you really have to be strong and firm on what your budget is and see what disappears when you hit retirement, if anything.
Well, and that 70-75% number has been around forever. And I think it's it's just an average of the belief that when you hit retirement, somehow you're not going to spend as much money. I think you're right. There's some line items there that you spend money on every month that will disappear, and there's some line items that weren't even on your radar
that'll come on
before you retire that are going to come on. And once again, if you look at our clients, man, 90% of them, I think their objective in the first 15 years of retirement, 10, 15 years of retirement, is to spend somewhere between 100 to 115, 125% of their income that they had pre-retirement. And that's dramatically different than what a lot of people out there are led to believe. And I think that's why, what's your typical pension provide? It's 2% per year. So if you're with your employer for 30 years, you're at 60%. Add on CPPOS, so there's your 75. Yeah. I have no disagreement, I guess, in that sense that you can live on that, but that's not maybe what everybody wants. And that's why I think it's really a big factor is to like you said, take these pieces and space out the time that you need to prepare for each one of these events. And retirement isn't a solo event. It's the start of a sequence of different events. And knowing where you want to be, the best you can. That's why all plans have to be flexible. But knowing where you want to be at each one of those stages financially lets you figure out what you can provide income-wise. And that's why it's called retirement planning, because if it doesn't, the numbers don't jive, then you need to save more. You need to get a better rate of return. You need to change your expectations. You need to change your retirement date. All of those things come into play here. And I think that's the key is you got to plan that out.
You got to plan it out, and it's usually not a plan that's written in stone. So you have to be flexible as you're going through it. And I think a big key is working with somebody who can understand it and maybe take an outside perspective and look at your plan and say, okay, I can see some hiccups here that are coming that you maybe aren't aware of. So watch out for this, be prepared for that. And I guess that's why people end up working with guys like you and me. It's not always just to go out there and pick investments for them. It's to design a plan for them that shows them, okay, here's what you should prepare for, and here's how we prepare for it. Yeah.
Well, one, I guess the joke we always have too is those clients that we have that have significant assets and have retired, and we have to encourage them to spend some money. Sometimes that's always crazy. And what's our favorite line to them?
Yeah, well, you better start flying first class, because if you don't, your kids will.
That's right. So that's the unintended consequences of estate planning.
Worked. I don't know if anybody actually goes out and spends more because of that comment.
We've had some go to live a little bit better, stay at better places when they travel. Obviously in the last couple of years, not much has happened, but it's those are just little quips that, kind of make people, it's how much they value certain parts of their retirement and how much they value passing on assets and so on. Sometimes people unintentionally pass along a big pile of assets because they're more fearful in their own time of running out. Yet they don't realize foregoing some of the things they might have done is just passing a huge amount of assets to someone who's in a completely different financial situation and might not have the same plans with the money. So we don't, once you're gone, you don't know what somebody's going to spend your money on. Yeah. That's just what it is. So decide on how much you are comfortable passing on and that, but we'll talk that one in estate planning as well. We'll get a little bit more detailed there.
Yeah. Well, I think that's all the points I wanted to get out there in regards to being retirement ready. Any other topics you want or points you would touch on?
I think some of them will drill down into more detail. This is just an overview and oversight of retirement planning and some of the things to think about when you're preparing for it. So I think for somebody who's not working with an advisor, I guess my only comment would be is there's plenty of sites out there on the web to help you kind of simple financial planning software. I know Quicken's got something and there's quite a few. If you go to a lot of the investment firms' websites, they've got quick calculators to help you with that. If you're part of a plan, and you have a pension plan with that's held by some of the companies, Manulife, Industrial Alliance, Great West Life. They all have calculators online. Some of them that you can tie into the pension that you're going to receive from them and do some calculations as to your retirement ready, as you call it. I mean, we do that with our own clients. We have that retirement ready piece, and so it's important to figure those numbers out.
Right on. Yeah. Well, thanks for watching this episode of the Tower Wealth Advisory podcast series. If you want to learn more about us, go to towerwealth.com or follow us on social media.